Hey everybody, just reached 100 subscribers. Really pumped. Me and Rob are doing a bit of a sweepstakes, bit of a giveaway available to all our worldwide subscribers. All you have to do is be subscribed, leave a like on the video, and put a comment on one of our videos explaining which one of our videos you like the most and which one you want us to see in the future. We'll be giving away one Crucible of War playmat, as you can see in my screen, and Rob will be giving away two cold foils.
One cold foil Kodachi promo and one Romping Club cold foil promo as well.
Thanks everyone for watching. Hello everybody and welcome to a Spark of Genius production. We have our very first, I believe it's the very first discussion video if I'm not mistaken here.
Yeah.
And I think, because everything else has been interviews, so I think we set a bit of a goal when we were looking at producing content to also include some more casual, light contents that can be like listened to on Spotify, watched on YouTube, and goes into Flesh and Blood as a game more indirectly. And so it takes the approach of, here is this relatively new game. How's it stack in the market? How is it stack with competitors? How's the game itself? Is it a healthy game? That kind of stuff. Akin to something like, card previews, new sets. So it's under the same kind of umbrella of those kinds of topics. We will be producing some Everfest content, as me and Rob we have ordered combined a fair amount of boxes. Let's just say it that way.
Yep.
And we're looking at doing some box breaks, card reviews, card spoilers, things like that. And for now, what we're planning on doing is with it's like a bit of a gold rush with the Kickstarters. Every couple of weeks I'm hearing about this new Kickstarter trading card game, and I've been taken aback a bit on how popular some of these games have been. And as we all know, Flesh and Blood was not started on Kickstarter. It was released kind of homegrown in New Zealand, going to a bunch of events, the Slingshot Underground and such, and taking a bit of a more subtle approach to it instead of kind of trying to raise a whole lot of money and do way too much way too soon. And so today we're kind of going to be looking at Flesh and Blood in the eyes of, how does it stand compared to all these like games that have come out, whether you back them or not. That's not really, we're not here to talk about these other games in any sort of real detail. It's really in the lens of Flesh and Blood mainly and the comparison of such. And so I think just starting a little bit about Flesh and Blood, it did start, I believe, in 2019, October, I want to say. I think October was when Welcome to Wraith Alpha released.
Right, and they do have promotional material from 2018. As like
they do.
You've seen some cards with the 2018 timestamp at the bottom, right? So the copyright timestamp. So we know that some cards were created before the official release, kind of. But I believe the game did take off in 2019. Yeah.
In 2019, and they had of course, the Slingshot Underground, the playmat. They had the Iron Rot, the promos from
OXO.
And then they have
proof promos.
Yeah, they have exactly. They have like cold foil proofs essentially, which is like more old school. And then they had, I know they gave away what's that DJ's name? They gave him a Heart of Findel proof. I forgot what his name was. Steve Aoki, yeah. So they've obviously have like some of this. Let's give some away and burn the rest. Like obviously, yeah, exactly. And it's very different from Kickstarter, which, for those who don't know, Kickstarter is a web platform that allows you to, as the name suggests, kickstart your own pledge goals for different trading card games that are in production, in some sort of stage of production. Some of them are a lot earlier than others. And the goal of different Kickstarters varies depending on how big the company is who puts it on. If you got a very small indie developer who really doesn't have much backing at all, versus like some bigger guys who doesn't have backing for like an expansion on a game or something like that, or maybe they need the funding for something very specific. And so Flesh and Blood, when it was released, the game was in development for quite a while, and then it started getting marketed and eventually grew from there. So we're going to take a look at a couple of these Kickstarter games. Some of them have ended already. Some of them, depending on when you're watching the video, some of them have ended a little while ago, and some of them are still running. And so the first one we're going to look at is Genesis Battle of Champions Origins. And this game is probably one of the more well-known ones in the Kickstarter world, as it has already been out for a little while, actually. To be fair, it's been out The alpha came out in 2017.
Right, it's been a few years now that it's been in the market. I mean, you can go today and buy this game on eBay. You can go, I believe certain LGSs do have this game. None that I know of, to be honest, but I know that after looking at their website, certain LGSs in the area actually do sell this game. So it's been around. It's been around. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been around. It's the Kickstarter specifically is for the Origins. So this is like for a different kind of I call it a module
almost
expansion,
like
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely as of it is a Canadian game. I do have to admit
that is true,
and yeah. it was Canadian. Pledged proudly Canadian. They had a pretty meager goal of, I say meager, I mean modest. They had a pretty modest goal of about 15,000 Canadian dollars, which is about $10 American, over the exchange rate is nowadays. And so it reached 415,000 of the 15K, 655 backers for the Oranges.
So it is
and
pretty heavily backed, this expansion.
It is, yeah, it is definitely heavily backed with some 2022 release dates for this kind of thing. It is a bit of a different game, so it's a tactical collectible card game. So it's not directly parallel to something like Flesh and Blood. It is a bit of a different genre, but
yeah.
The reason I want to bring this game up is the amount of hype around it is pretty high. They did have like a championships recently. They did have some organized play here and there. The game isn't like stupendously popular that I've seen in Canada and the US, but
I mean, until we've started looking into games on Kickstarter and heard this from other members of Discords and Facebook groups, I had not heard of this game. I'll be honest. It's a game that is not widely available in like kind of the more, I guess, mainstay brick and mortar stores around me. Some of the more popular names don't carry this product, and I mean, a lot of the reason why some of these games may be so heavily backed is just because of the Kickstarter platform. I hate to say it, but I think that Kickstarter just kind of gives it like a new lens where people are like, it's an easy way to back a project. It doesn't require much commitment from our end. You kind of click a button. Only when they reach their goal you get charged, so there's not much of a risk, as someone who's backing. And it seems like this is kind of like a trend, which I hope that in this video we kind of dissociate a little bit between what's a trend that might fail in the short term and what's something that kind of might be with us for a little while, at least in terms of like gameplay and collectability. So like first impressions on this game, since it wasn't well known at all, and now it's reached, I think, now $400,000 on Kickstarter. I'm not too convinced. I don't know about you.
I know there was, I don't know if it was another Kickstarter, but I know they were releasing like a second edition unlimited print of like one of the alpha sets, like
starts with a re-releasing.
Yeah, like the re-release. I don't know if it's this exact Kickstarter, honestly. There might be like a separate Kickstarter or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. But the because some of the product is already available, like the pre-orders and such. And I think the game itself looks, Jalera second edition. I just kind of saw it on the thing here.
And the corner of your eye just came to you.
Yeah, in the corner of my eye. And I have tried the game actually once or twice, and it was fun.
So however, you've heard of this game before Kickstarter, or you tried it after you heard about it on Kickstarter?
No, I heard about it on Kickstarter. One of my local stores did back the game. It did have like some content surrounding the game, and I was asked to try it out by one of the members, and I did try it out. It was fun. It was one of those kind of like, I'd pick it up, I'd play a couple games, and I probably wouldn't play it again.
Not one you'd return to. Yeah. It is grid based, as far as I could tell from watching a few online games. I believe it's a 4x5 grid that you place your cards on. Each card has like a certain amount of movement that or like attack range, I believe. So it's almost like a grid based RPG kind of game. Yeah,
it's very similar to like a Fire Emblem.
I was going to bring up
on tabletop, it's kind of like a bit of a Fire Emblem-ish. It is like a 2-player game. It doesn't really, I don't think it has a PvE components or something like this. And then you essentially, if you have 0 hit left or no cards left, you lose. So very similar to any other trading card game. But the games are fairly short. I think they're within mine ended at about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So it's definitely very blitz game territory here. And I don't, as far as like a tactical collectible card game, I think the tactical part is definitely correct. The collectible part,
yeah.
My main gripe with the game compared to something like FaB is that akin to FaB, you're essentially saying that FaB released in 2019, and now 4 years later, I'm going to run a Kickstarter for a revised second printing of Arcane Rising.
Right, it doesn't look good.
I feel like if the game was popular enough, shouldn't really need a Kickstarter to kickstart its way into.
It's almost like they're getting
another
like government bailout here, right? They're a company that
well,
failed.
Yeah, that's actually a good one.
Bailout, right? And now it's like, okay, we're gonna do something else with a promise of maybe this returning more profit, right? So, I mean, one of the negatives I saw at first glance for this game was the cards themselves. I was comparing them to FaB in general, and I mean, I've got just a card here for FaB, but you can kind of see in a FaB card, everything is very well organized, and the cards look very simple. I think that for a game to really, in terms of like a playability aspect, if the cards are very busy, they become very like complicated to play. And looking at some of these cards, like for Genesis, there's a lot going on the card, right?
There is like a lot of stats, numbers.
Nothing's really centered properly either. Kind of like left, right on the card. You see.
Can you imagine grading some of this stuff? Like
what's off center? It's not meant to be centered, but
that's also a bit of a point I wanted to bring up with like Flesh and Blood compared to other card games and even Kickstarter card games. If you're calling your card game collectible, and it's not immediately obvious what the grading market will dictate its value, because like a lot of the investors slap their most expensive stuff. It's not truly collectible unless you can, in my mind, it's not truly collectible unless you can slap most, if not all, your collection of your high-end valuable like alphas.
You know, at least
eventually, yeah. And I do like the artwork, to be fair, but the artwork reminds me more of like a Pathfinder D&D, like creating your character art style, which makes a lot of sense. But I feel like in a card game, it might be like, I think there's a sweet spot with like old school Magic the Gathering, Flesh and Blood, where the art style is just detailed enough in one card that you can really take in the card itself, the text, the art, the flavor, but not get overwhelmed. Like I'm looking at some of these characters in Genesis, these champions, and it's a lot to take in eventually. They might have extended arts and such, but anyways, that's a little bit about Genesis. We can move on here. We don't make this a Genesis show.
Right, and then we can even, have we're going to have common themes across these games, I'm sure. And just to start some of those off, I mean, you were talking about the artwork of the cards, and I think that my biggest, alluring factor to a card game is the art. Like, I will not back a game that I don't think the art looks, really good. I'm not going to pick on any yet. Maybe we'll touch on a few soon. But
I know you have one in mind. Well, a couple in mind, but yeah. No, I know what you mean.
There has to be good artwork. The foiling has to be very nice. And I personally like cards with borders. I mean, I come from a Yu-Gi-Oh background in Pokemon, where all the cards, at least in old school Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh, had nice bordering. And Magic the Gathering too. Most of these card games started out with like, bordered cards. That eventually extended onto like the full arts without the borders, which I'm less.
All the VMAXs and such.
All the VMAXs, exactly. So I mean, for me, more than anything else, it's artwork, and I would say it even trumps gameplay for me. I don't know about you, but if I'm putting my money into a game that I feel like, I don't want to just be wasting my money. Like I would buy games to play. I have board games. That's what I would kind of consider a game that you would like put money into. You're just playing it. You forget about return on investment, right, or collectability. You are just spending the money to play the game. X number of hours is what matters for that money. But
no, I totally agree.
For collectible card games and trading card games, you want them to be at least collectible. You want them to be
you want like a unique feature, right?
Yeah, and if artwork is lacking, the game could be hella fun, but if it's not nice and aesthetically pleasing, you lost my interest.
No, it's fair. And I think a lot of like higher end collectors would probably agree with you there. Like if the game itself dies, right? So let's say the gameplay is awful, but at least the card's aesthetically pleasing, you have something there, because collectors don't necessarily play the game. They're not going to play in their slabs. So we're gonna well, some do maybe, but or at least semi-rigids.
Gathering players. Anyway. Yeah.
So we're moving on to another game, a bit of a, I guess I'm going to call it a Weiss, a future Weiss game, maybe, just based on the art style. And this is Grand Archive TCG, and this game is backed over $1 million Canadian on its $64,000 with about 1,300 backers as of this video. So this game is backed about over double than the Genesis on Kickstarter, and it's a very, very different art style. It's definitely anime. Reminds me a lot of Weiss. On this list, wouldn't be ashamed to admit for the release ones, this is the one that I'm probably the most excited about, only because it's got a lot of nice aspects to it. Like the collectability seems pretty nice. I like that their foil cards are actually 1 in 8 packs, I believe.
That's right.
So foils actually have a higher collectability. They have some of the art is like they have like a collector's version. They do have the First Ed Unlimited. I am less excited about that model, given Flesh and Blood's. Yeah, like even talking a little bit about the model for Flesh and Blood, this First Ed Unlimited, I think it's got to die. I mean, I think it had its purpose in the very early sets to be able to, because like the print run was so small for Welcome to Wraith.
So you want to award the people who've been in it that early on, right? So you have the alpha sets and you have the unlimited afterwards. Yeah.
However, to expand the game for these really core sets, Welcome to Wraith, Arcane, even Crucible is the first real main expansion set. Running an unlimited print run makes a lot of sense, given its original print run. Started with Monarch and even Tales, the value has, how do I say this very politely, gone a little in the toilet. And the reason is because the First Ed product is not holding well. Monarch exploded in terms of print run, in terms of people buying. Tales was not that much different. And the issue is that this unlimited print is coming out like a month, 2 months, 3 months. It's like, well,
yeah. I don't. I'm going to add on the Monarch kind of crash has other reasons.
The Monarch crash.
We can talk the great Monarch crash of 2020.
No, we don't have enough time to talk about the great Monarch crash.
We can talk about that in a separate video, I think. Yeah. But there are other reasons besides just the first edition and unlimited run. Like, I mean, I won't talk about it, but yeah, people probably know.
No, but that's like one of the in my mind, it made sense for the first couple sets, but I think it needs to go. I kind of like go the way of Pokemon, just eliminating it all entirely. Like I know Yu-Gi-Oh has first eds, but Yu-Gi-Oh EV is, I don't even want to talk about it. But we're talking about like Pokemon, they do their one set. Magic the Gathering is a little bit of a different beast, obviously, with their collector boosters being vastly more expensive than their so-called unlimited, like their core sets, their draft sets. It's a little bit different.
There's a pro and con with that, I believe, because at least in FaB, you can buy first ed for MSRP for $130 now Canadian. If you had collector sets, it'd be like, well, now I've got to dish out $200, $300 for it. It's a little expensive.
I don't think that would work either. I just think it's like maybe just go the way of Pokemon. It's just do a box, release the box. Their print run, their print facilities and their print run, their distribution seems to be up to speed to the point where I don't see stores lacking in Monarch or Tales product print one rise. Like it's not a thing that's happening.
I'm gonna try to rail us back onto the topic at hand. Actually,
yeah, sorry.
Where is this going?
Grand Archive. So they've got a lot of other collectibles. I like the art style. I'm not like I was never a big Weiss player myself, but
yeah, I've tried it. But
I do think the art is nice. I do think the warrior card, which is just anime Dorinthia in my mind. The main female character here.
The female character, sword.
Yeah.
Sword.
Lorraine, I believe. Lorraine, Wandering Warrior. It's just anime Dorinthia. And then the card backs look exactly the same as Flesh and Blood. I'm not gonna lie. The card backs.
There was a post on Facebook recently where they compared the FaB logo and the Grand Archive logo, and it's like they just flipped the Grand Archive logo and made it blue, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm not sure what to.
And I do like, collectability wise, I do like this metal card idea. As far as like somehow cold foiling and Flesh and Blood.
Well, the metal card promo is specific for the Kickstarter, right? So
it's a backer,
pledge a certain amount, and then you get a metal card as part of the Kickstarter.
I like that.
So it won't be part of the main sets. You're not going to pull a metal card. That'd be kind of crazy for weighing packs, right? A metal card.
No, yeah,
but,
no.
No, it's only for the Kickstarter, so it's not like a perpetual model they have. It's just like a one-time thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do like the collector's rare, like the artist signed signature, that kind of thing, because it adds that level of uniqueness and the exclusive like art frame collector signature. and it's a 1 in 360 packs to get that collector rare. It's only in First Ed too, so that's like it's like a Fable, well, ish, 360 packs, not exactly.
How many boxes is that? Like 10 boxes, I think, if they're 36 packs.
36 packs. Yeah, so it's actually very, very similar to a Fable. Wow, this game takes a lot more than I thought it did from Flesh and Blood. Yeah. Okay, but the foil scarcity, the 1 in 8 packs contains a full card. I actually like that quite a bit. I don't know how you feel about that, but this is the only game where I actually saw this kind of foil rarity. How do you feel about that compared to FaB, where there is now in First Ed there's a cold foil or a foil? Yeah, there's at least a cold foil, if not a rainbow foil, in the First Ed.
I'll kind of speak to Yu-Gi-Oh a bit in that regard. Yu-Gi-Oh, when the earlier sets came out, you got at minimum a rare card with title foil. I don't know if you remember, but it was like a silver title or name of the card. Yes. That was the rarity. Mm-hmm. And then if you got lucky, that rare slot would change into a super rare slot or an ultra rare slot where you had different foiling on the card. So Yu-Gi-Oh eventually, when they released unlimited sets, like I don't know how many years after, but they would actually auto-include then a super rare or higher. So a full foil card per pack. And I didn't like that at all. It took away that kind of hype of pulling a super rare or higher, which was like a full art, or not full art, but a full foil card in Yu-Gi-Oh! And so I really like the idea of foils being less common.
I think it cheapened the value, right? It cheapened the experience.
You get a foil, and it's like, I don't know how many foils I've opened that I've just tossed to the side, right? Like foil commons, foil rares even. It's like, okay, let's move it along, right? Let's find those majestic foils. So
so I do like that. I like the print run information for Grand Archive. They said it's fully available for all products before release date. I mixed feelings about that one. I think it's mainly
when you're comparing to FaB. I like how FaB releases it a year after they haven't said exactly how long until after, but
so far it's roughly that amount.
A year after release they release the print run numbers. I like that better because knowing print run numbers ahead of time could make it a very fierce
the market's gonna be weird.
The market would be very weird, you're right. So I'm not sure if I like that. That's a unproven concept currently. I believe no other TCGs are doing that to release print run numbers before the release. So we'd have to see. That's a risk, I would say, to this game. Is if this kind of makes the market kind of go wild every release, it's going to be very hard for even low to mid tier collectors to get in there. Because
I agree.
Maybe if they had released print run numbers for for example for Monarch before release, it'd be all dried up. Maybe the supply would be all gone.
I think we would have had a very different scenario if all the print run. People were just like speculating on print run numbers, and they just went like bananas. And anyways,
but
gonna ignore that topic one more time. But I do like.
I was gonna say in terms of collectability, right? So you have like this new card game, Grand Archive, that is seemingly favoring or almost prioritizing collectability here. Not to say their gameplay isn't good, but they're really coming out of the gate with collectability in mind. And we saw that with Metazoo. Metazoo had that in its Kickstarter. FaB did too to some degree, right? FaB had the idea that we're going to release premium foil, cold foils. We will have first edition alpha, all that stuff. So there is collectability. They had it as part of their game plan. But it seems like, and even Grand Archive also has NFTs, which is a totally different, totally new concept, almost unproven, I want to say, in terms of card games, because we don't know really where that's going to lead 5-10 years from now. But they seem to have at the forefront of their plan collectability, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But at some point it kind of seems a bit gimmicky. I don't want to say it's a bad thing, but it's,
they're trying to make like a Pokemon style where most people are collectors and they're collectors and speculators. People play the game, but not to the same extent. So that's how we think about this. So I'll move on to the next one. From Grand Archive to Nostalgix, and I guess they're doing a play on words with nostalgic. I thought that was
cheesy. I saw that at first, and I was like, that's kind of it's a bit meta, right? You're kind of saying that your game is kind of going to be a nostalgic trip for people buying this, people who've played old school Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon. You're gonna see this game and be like, oh, this hits all the nostalgic notes, right? And I'm kind of like, that's a bit presumptuous. a bit presumptuous. Not gonna lie.
It is very heavily backed, but what about 1.2 million Canadian, 2,100 backers? Very similar to Grand Archive. They do bring it back the metal card. All these Kickstarters with their metal cards and such. I think the art in Nostalgix compared to FaB is very, very different as opposed to like, it reminds me a lot of like Digimon, those kinds of games, especially old school Digimon.
I mean, it seems like they have a degree of art, right? There's some art that's more like mech side, where you have like these kind of like armored, characters, and then you have like these almost like Digimon-esque, characters. Like it's like Frog that I'm seeing. So a bit all over the place. If you dislike a certain art style, and you might find that in this game, you might kind of find something that you dislike from this game. It's a bit wild.
True, but we do see so they've taken a bit of a note from Flesh and Blood as they put on their Kickstarter $1 million. The event confirmed World Championships 2022. So this is the first Kickstarter we've seen that actually puts a real emphasis on organized play /
we haven't seen this yet. Actually,
Genesis was like, oh, we'll add a circuit here, a circuit there.
More of a loose promise, right? It's like eventually we'll do this. Just like they've had events before. Organized play. Okay. Yeah. So they've done it.
But like this one is a new game this is the first new game I've seen that they've actually said, hey, we're going to run this in Minneapolis at the end of 2022, 2023.
That's kind of risky. I mean, I like that they're mentioning it, but at the same time, I think you're skipping a few bounds here by announcing that you're going to have a world circuit, world championship when no one's played the game yet, right?
You can play it on TTS. You can play it on TTS. You can't you can't actually play it with real cards yet.
Yeah. That's Nostalgix.
But, I mean, what do you think?
The art doesn't really appeal to me that much, I'll be honest.
That's fair.
It seems like it's lacking detail.
I also noticed. I also noticed that some of these games are definitely like focusing on local game stores. So they're at the very bottom of the article. You'll say like, I'm a local game store, how I'm supported, or they have retail kits. So they have specific kits for retail that gives you a better price on boxes. They say they're going to support LGSs, and for like Nostalgix, for example, they're saying the first debt is for them. You can get packs, you can get stuff. We offer discounts, blah blah blah. But you notice it's not even close to what LSS is doing with the armory kits for the special events. Like I don't see any mention of any of that here.
There's actually a pretty big spectrum when it comes to in-person play all the way to like online play, right? And you have some of the Kickstarters, and I think Genesis might have been one of them, or maybe it was Grand Archive, but they mentioned as one of their stretch goals was if they got to like, I think 2 million backed, they will release an online platform.
That was Nostalgix. Yeah, I think that was the
okay.
They had the VR, like I think it's the VR also. They're gonna do like oh my god, where'd it go? Yeah, here. So 2 million, it's gonna be on all platforms. So they have like an Oculus on there, phone, a laptop, a desktop, and they're gonna say it costs like 250, 750K, plus about 10K monthly upkeep.
So
however,
I don't
think it's gonna get to 2 million.
I don't know if I mean they're 1.2 now, you said, so they're kind of
crazy. With 6 days to go.
Yeah. So I think that if you want to be successful, you got to commit to one thing. I don't know
agree.
if they should go that broad in their.
So why net, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you want to get as many people into one area as possible, I think. So whether it's an LGS with organized play, you play in a store, or you grow your online platform and you get a bunch of people in the online client. Like if you're looking for matches, you want to find people quickly. You have to get concentrated amounts or a concentrated amount of people into one area as best as you can. And if you're casting your net over a wide area, you're gonna have like a few fish here, a few fish there, right? It's gonna be very hard to have anything grow, really. So I am worried about that.
I think their intention is good. I think a lot of these Kickstarters are super, like they have their stretch goals and such, but sometimes they get a bit too big for their, what's that saying? Too big for your britches?
We'll go with that.
Britches.
Anyways, it's a new expression.
They're getting a bit too ambitious. Flesh and Blood developed their gameplay, and they stood on their gameplay for their cards plus their art. And then they added something unique, which is cold foiling. They focused on a very specific set of things. They developed it for a very long time before they released it.
Yeah,
and you can really see their homework and their sets as they were released.
That up, right? The amount of time that they spent building the game. So Flesh and Blood, I believe James White had mentioned it was 7 years in the design phase.
Something like that, yeah.
And they talked about, they designed their borders, the gameplay, everything about the game was 7 years. Where we don't see that very much in these Kickstarter games. I have not read a single line saying that we have been working on this game for X number of years. It's always like we have a passion for anime in terms of Grand Archive. We are artists passionate about anime. We are game enthusiasts who have been playing games for a decade. It doesn't speak too much about the experience of building games. I feel so. When you're looking at new games, a sad truth is a lot of them are going to fail, right?
Most of them will fail.
Most of them will. I would say even like a few percentages of the games will succeed into the future. Just look at all the games that have failed before MTG, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and you can back them all, but you can't invest your time and your energy into every one of these games. So you really got to be choosy. You can put $100 into each of these Kickstarters and just sit on a box. That's not a big deal. But if you're as invested in a card game as we are in FaB, and as many other people are in Flesh and Blood, you cannot distribute that over every game that's on Kickstarter. That will not work.
It's true.
So I do think that there is some caution to be had with these games. I would not be kind of investing heavily into each of these games. It's just impossible, right? So you got to pick the ones that you really think are gonna fly.
Speaking of games that I don't think is gonna fly, we got Deep Spirits, and I'm not even gonna talk that much about it. I just think it's like a discount Pokemon Metazoo.
It's like, Mom, can we have Pokemon? No, we have Pokemon at home. Pokemon at home.
Like I don't really understand why this game is trying to exist. However, I think it's kind of like someone had a project or an idea and they're like, maybe we can make some money off it.
I think
they got backed.
You're probably right about that, because a lot of games that are just kind of piggybacking off the hype of this new 2021-2020 Kickstarter trend.
I think this is one of those games. It's also estimated delivery is December, so this one was funded $362,000.
So
499 backers.
It was heavily backed, like just as much as I believe Genesis currently is. But I'm looking at the art. It just doesn't do it for me.
I don't even really want to talk that much about it. I just think the art style is it's all ages. It's very much meant to be more of a kid's like a kid's game, like a very try to get them when they're young and then develop an appetite for the brand. It's very similar to Metazoo Pokemon,
Metazoo
right?
Here, right? Like
we are, which is perfect.
If you're comparing this to Metazoo, I would say Metazoo is leaps and bounds kind of beyond this one. I think that it's even questionable whether or not Metazoo will survive. I think this one is kind of bottom of the barrel. Like I probably wouldn't even.
I like it.
I won't even bother.
Let's roll in straight to Metazoo. Let's dump Deep Spirits here. Metazoo, funnily enough, it we're gonna talk like the game's out already. So the next couple games.
Really under the Kickstarter. It was from Kickstarter, which is why we're talking about.
It was from Kickstarter. But
it's just it's kind of already out. So yeah.
And this was one of the bigger games on Kickstarter that started this phenomenon. This was one of the first ones in recent times that went on Kickstarter. It didn't even make that much money. It only made $18,000 apparently. But
that's surprising, actually. I didn't know that fact.
Yeah, well, I mean, according to Kickstarter, but people bought into it and they casted a really wide net. They wanted to be the next Pokemon. The game's been out with 2 sets here, and kind of mixed. It's trying to do everything all the time. I think it's got some neat ideas. I did open a little bit of this product myself. I very much tried to like it. The game is very, very cartoony. It's all these these perks, like if you bring tinfoil with you, turn your light on, turn your stove on.
If you're looking at the spectrum of collectability and playability, you have Metazoo all the way on the collectability side. Like they're trying really hard to be like, I think NFTs as well. They have, if I'm not mistaken, they have NFTs. They're really trying to be what Pokemon is right now. Big shoes to fill. I mean, FaB never made that claim that it wants to be Magic the Gathering. FaB's slogan is even the brand new classic TCG or something like that, right? It's like they're trying to be their own thing. Metazoo, I think, is piggybacking a little hard. I don't know whether that's good or not for the brand. It probably is pretty good for the brand, actually, but
I think it's fine. I think their art style is kind of meh. I don't particularly like it, obviously, but I know you don't definitely don't
I've
like
been
it.
vocal about just hating the art style, but it is trying to be that nostalgic Pokemon art, right? It's trying to like, if you look at old base set Pokemon, it's trying to mimic that, which I would argue it's doing pretty poorly because I don't like the art. I love the old Pokemon art. I do not like the Metazoo art. Right.
I just think it's fine. Again, I didn't want to talk that much about Metazoo. We kind of had it on our list, and then we had two more games very quickly talking about past successes slash failures in comparison to where Flesh and Blood currently is, and it's very very new horizons, as they say. Let me make a pun about New Horizon. I don't know, maybe. And it's two games that were on Kickstarter. One of them backed by Rudy, actually, called MegaCorp, and it was backed about $12,000, 130 backers. Pretty relatively small
That's
backing.
A small pool actually of backers too, like 30
backers. It's a small pool. Reminds me a lot of Netrunner, and it's essentially about corporations. There's no governments. Corporations rule the world, and they're trying to take each other's stuff to rule the world on their car. You're trying to bankrupt or buy out the competition, kind of thing. The gameplay was actually pretty fun. I did actually remember looking at, I believe it was a video of people playing it. It was actually a pretty fun game. However, the issue is that it's a good example of a game that tried to get off and running from Kickstarter, but it suffered through some problems with just overall distribution, the product itself, getting it out there. I know it might have been a Gen Con. I don't actually know if it was
just
a Gen
to give
Con.
some background as well. This game came out in 2017, I believe, right? So this is a game that was out for now a few years.
2016, 2017, something like that.
Okay, yeah. And this was promoted by Rudy before he promoted Flesh and Blood, I believe.
Yes, a couple years before. So this is a bit of a like, even Rudy can miss. Like he can do as much as he can.
Right.
Obviously, he's wildly successful on YouTube. Started with Magic and then finding Flesh and Blood. Like he took a chance on Flesh and Blood that nobody did, really. So can't fault him for that. But this is just an example of one of those Kickstarter games that, hey, this was also this had the makings to be quite big, but it just didn't take off. And I think it was missing a couple of the. It was a very for fun game. It was a very like playable game.
Yeah.
Very little collectible value.
Yeah, talking about that spectrum again of entirely being on the playability side. I forget which side I put playability. Playability side. You're looking at these past games, and a lot of them did fail because they were way too heavily on the playability side. They kind of fit almost in board game territory at that point, right? Where you buy a board game, you don't care about the money at that point. You spend your $50, you got a board game, play it for X amount of hours, make your money back, entertainment value. But you're not collecting. I mean, I guess you could collect board games if they're still sealed, but that's besides the point. This is more of I believe the term is living card game. It's more you buy a set, kind of like Netrunner, and then you get, you know exactly what you're getting. It's kind of like buying starter decks, and there's, as far as I know, no booster packs or no booster boxes for this set, or it failed before the booster boxes could come out.
Well, I think they released it after, but I'm not like entirely sure how well it did. I know Rudy did have some with them, but they did have they had their metal cards. Everyone's got a metal, even they had it. So again, obviously it's not a new metal reward cards for the Kickstarter, but I think as Rob's saying here, it's a bit of a mixed bag depending on how something will do on Kickstarter versus if people think they can actually invest in the game itself, right?
Yeah.
And the last.
Before we jump into the last one, I kind of want to talk about. We're talking about these games that failed and some that have yet to come out, and then we have Flesh and Blood. So, are we seeing like a trend in terms of like maybe a formula that Flesh and Blood is using that is kind of something that other Kickstarters are using as well to be successful? And do we see red flags in terms of, could there be too much playability, which I believe there could be? Could there be too much collectability? We don't really know yet if too much collectability is a bad thing, but I will say that once the Kickstarter dries up and all of that premium product is out there, you have people investing, because obviously you can make money off this stuff. We're not claiming here that you shouldn't buy a game because you won't make money off of it. I believe you can if you're into that kind of thing where you buy for X amount of dollars on Kickstarter, then you flip it back onto the secondary market. Like, you can, but in terms of long-term growth and sustainability, once those initial boxes go from Kickstarter, the people who have backed it, I don't think they're going to go back for more editions once they come out, right? Like, you're someone who, if you want to flip for money, you're not going to go in for the second set or the third set. You know, it's kind of like in Flesh and Blood, if people who have heavily invested in alpha product, I don't think they're going to heavily invest in, like, you know, there's Monarch and there's Tales of Aria. So you're losing a chunk of, I believe, the core investors or the core money that came in almost off the bat. So you need a player base to keep the game going long term. I believe that's the lifeblood of a game, really, is playability. And a lot of these Kickstarter projects are going to lose their initial investors, you know, once they come out after maybe a year or two, once, you know, their premium product no longer exists and it's just kind of run-of-the-mill stuff like unlimited products and like fourth or fifth sets of the game. So you really need to have people who play the game to keep, you know, product rolling, to keep purchases rolling. And I don't think a lot of games will have that, to be honest. So
I agree that the balance, you were talking about success factors here. I think the balance is you have a healthy collector base, which is driven by art and is driven by value, right? And then you have to have a healthy player base, which is driven on affordability and gameplay. And I think those are the real key success factors. Out of all the games we talked about, I really only see that in Grand Archive, as far as, like, I think they're doing their collectability correctly. The foiling rate, the unlimited product, the special kind of tiers here and there. I think out of everything we talked about, they would be the one I would put more money on to succeed, comparatively speaking. However,
I'm worried about NFTs a little bit, but that's kind of like a bonus. Not everything that's collectible of the game is an NFT. They have that as like a separate thing. But NFTs are
a bit of a mark to the future.
So it's like, it's kind of a scary.
Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad.
Yeah, and I think one of the big concerns about NFTs is just the impact on the environment, right? It's kind of like mining coin or mining crypto. You have to put a lot of processing power into creating these NFTs. So people are concerned that this isn't a very sustainable practice, product. So if the game leans too heavily on NFTs, I'd be cautious. Grand Archive kind of has like a taste of it. It's like you can get NFTs with certain packs, I believe. And I think they might have touted at going a more green route with their NFTs. I'm not sure, but I think I might have heard that from an interview at some point in the past month or two. But the thing is, like, NFTs, once you have something that's more green that comes out, you kind of get rid of all the other ones that have come before. Like, I think the technology, if it improves, you kind of trash all the ones that have come before it in a way. So it's kind of scary.
I agree.
It's like investing in like iPhones or something like that, right? Like, you have technology that comes out. Once the new one comes out, you're kind of outdating the previous one. So it is scary. I'll leave it at that. You know, NFTs, I'm kind of a big question mark on, but yeah.
No, I agree. The last kind of topic, I guess, that I want to display here is creating a novel proposition. And when I mean by like a novel, I don't mean like a book. I mean like a new proposition, essentially. And the reward for creating an effective anything that a card game hasn't done properly before is quite large in my view. And Flesh and Blood they have very, very good lore, especially in the Welcome to Wraith appreciation kit with the book, essentially. Right. Yeah. And they've got some of the cleanest lore as far as like readability and like expansion. It's very, very similar to like a League of Legends, which is it's a very strange parallel to make between like League of Legends.
I could see it.
Yeah, because like the Legend, you know, Riot Games was able to like capitalize on all these different worlds and characters and create a Netflix series, create a bunch of different games, create whatever on a base game that was a MOBA that was very, very specific. And I think it's weird that I think Flesh and Blood has a very similar way of structuring the world. Maybe that's why they got the inspiration for it. But there is one game, and where I'm going with that is PvE, which is a bit of a strange concept as far as card games. And there is one game that did release on Kickstarter called Hex TCG, which is a Hex MMO trading card game, which Rob had no idea about, but I actually backed way back. When was this? 2013 was the release date.
Oh, really?
And it has 17,765 backers, $2.27 million. This was clearly fairly successful as far as this Kickstarter. And the whole premise of this game it was online. This wasn't a in-person game. They had a client as a client base in PC or Mac, and it had a PvE component and a PvP component. It had a lot of very revolutionary ideas as far as a PvE campaign, that you can add customizable cards you can use in PvE, had an online auction house, it had PvP, obviously. Its art was fantastic, and it had a collectability aspect like no other game I've ever seen. And the big part was the single player MMO was actually really, really good. Which is really strange to think about, that they actually did it correctly. And the only reason they ended up lasting for about 7 years or so, and I think the only reason is they got into a bit of a spat. Yeah, a bit of a spat with Wizards of the Coast via their resource system. Was essentially just called gems instead of land, but it was so similar that they ended up having to license it off Wizards of the Coast, and they couldn't afford the license, the renewal. And there were problems with the game, but however, it took a very new approach. It was able to burst out of the seams here with a whole lot of interesting stuff, and the PvE component of the game was actually the most popular, and it kind of fell through the wayside about halfway through the actual release, because they were trying to focus on being too much like a Magic the Gathering online with drafts and such, and other aspects that a lot of people played the game just for PvE. I kind of split my time between both, but my point in bringing this game up is that I think LSS has and I think they're going to, and I think they have a very good route to PvE content, and that is quite exciting because they would be the first trading card game in that position that can actually succeed, in my view, of PvE content. They have great characters. They've already introduced cards that seem like PvE cards, to be honest with you. Yeah. And so, you have Pit Fight and you have these other kind of interesting modes, but like a true PvE mode will bring in that player that D&D player, essentially, like a very, very similar kind of minded player that wants to run through like a dungeon or something or like a dungeon crawler, or like cooperative mode. And I think that will bring in a whole new group of players into your player base that's really, really quite positive for the game overall, because then you'll have a nice collector base, a competitive base with your pro play scene, as LSS has done a fantastic job to support even during COVID, and a PvE scene, which will bring in that last part of the triangle. I don't know if it's a triangle here.
There's my triangle. The pear shape you have, it's more of like a casual player base they're bringing in, I believe, with PvE, because this is not going to be like your competitive scene type of gameplay. This is going to be maybe you go to an LGS with a bunch of buddies, and if you beat the boss that's there, you get a promo or something like that, right? So it's kind of like
that's got to be coming. That's got to be coming. Yeah. Like that makes so much sense. Yeah. In my view.
I want to tie that back to the lore a bit, because you had mentioned a parallel with League of Legends, and Flesh and Blood started out, I believe, not so heavy on the lore side. They had the lore book that they gave to retailers in the appreciation kit, but most people couldn't have access to that. So the lore was pretty hidden from a lot of people, and you kind of got introduced to lore after you've played the game, right? Like, I believe they released like some Viserai lore with Monarch. They're releasing more lore now with Everfest. It's like you kind of get attached to a character through gameplay, and then they release lore after, and it's like, oh, cool. Like, then you're invested in the character, so you want to learn more about their backstory, as opposed to like the flip side where you get like a storybook and you read it, then the gameplay comes out afterwards. Don't know if it'll be as effective, but in League of Legends terms, I played the game before I even knew anything about the lore about any of my characters, to be honest, right? I would look at the snippet after and be like, oh, cool, and then I'd be invested because I love this character from a gameplay perspective. I know that some games are leaning heavily in the lore aspect of it. I believe Grand Archive said they're going to release, if they reach $1 million in their, which they have, they're going to release, I believe, a light novel.
A light novel, and then like an OVA or something, like an OVA
for
a
$2
video.
million. An approach that might work, but they're kind of going more like at the forefront with their lore. I believe if they release the book, you get to know the characters before you play. It might work, but it's like a flip strategy that FaB really had, where you play the game first, you get attached to the characters through gameplay, through the fun gameplay I'll add, and then you learn more about them through lore, which keeps you kind of entertained, keeps you wanting for more. So, I just wanted to bring that parallel up between FaB and other Kickstarter games. And I think other ones are also focusing on lore, but if they focus too much on it, I'm kind of skeptical a little bit.
It's really that like magical combination that I don't think that many games can successfully do it recently, like the newer age of games. Like Magic the Gathering had no competition, so they were the first ones to make a good game, and they were the good game on the block. And then Yu-Gi-Oh!
I'll add an asterisk that they did have some competition, but those games all died out. They're not here
today. They were the superior game with the superior art. They just won, right? And then you had anime backed games and like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! That anime, and they had a brand. I call them brand games. Like they had the brand behind the game. You played it because you watched the anime or you whatever, however else you consume that content. And then Flesh and Blood has neither. So they had to create a game that had superior gameplay and had a world that you'd have to buy into without any prior knowledge of anything about the world or characters. So
but their world is so rich though. Like you look at like this world they've built and it kind of just makes you very excited to learn more about it. Like I personally, if I had the lore book, I'd be reading that right now because I really want to know.
Expensive book.
Stories of Wraith. Yeah, I mean, I really wish they released that in like a paperback version because I just want to read it.
They have the high res PDF version.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yes, that's true. I should get on that.
They that was kind of all we wanted to talk about here. I mean, it's a pretty long video, but
any final points maybe to round this out or bring it home?
I think
like
based on
parallels,
I've backed Kickstarter games in the past. I'm very happy that Flesh and Blood was not on Kickstarter. I think they would have had to go way beyond what they actually wanted to do, and they would have had a lot of issues
just to get people's attention on Kickstarter with how many games are currently available. Like, not all of them
and I think
get backed.
And I think Kickstarter is a good medium for some games that you really need to know more about before you buy into, whereas Flesh and Blood's approach was a lot more grassroots expanded. So I think Kickstarter doesn't work for every game. It works for games that have so much information and so many details that you want to explain all to one source, that Kickstarter is the best way to do it. However, I think that in general, I'm still very cautious on Kickstarter trading card games. You can flip them until the sun goes down
sings.
Here. Until the crow sings. Oh God.
If we're mixing up expressions, there's one.
Anyways, that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
but hopefully,
I mean, I can add on to that notion as well.
Sure.
When you're looking at this market of trading card games, there's only so much market share that exists. It's a pool of money that goes. It's like a pie chart of how many games have how much market share. We can't realistically be expected to back every game heavily. You can put $100 into each box, and that's kind of my kind of philosophy. Is where like I'll give it a chance. I'll put $100 in, but I don't personally flip product. I know people do, and I'm not against that. It's just that if you want to back something heavily, you got to think about where market share is going. Most games will die, as we've said, and I think that Flesh and Blood has set a very good example for a lot of these games to follow. Clearly, right?
Yeah.
And so kind of more of a caution approach, like you are, like you're taking. We'll see where these games go in a few years. Very exciting times.
It's fantastic. Thanks for everyone for watching. Check us out. Check us out our Twitter, our Spotify. This discussion will be on Spotify as well for a bit of a longer recording, as this is intended for both platforms. So you can kind of put it in the background and take a bit of a break, maybe a bit of a lunch break. And that's I think as of this video coming out, we'll probably be done our sweepstakes, and so we'll be rolling for that very soon. And we'll be contacting the winners, and I think that's pretty much it. So depending on when you're watching this, hope you had a great holiday season. I know I have. And thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode.